Hello, everyone, and welcome to Talk About It Tuesday. I'm Tosca Di Matteo, founder of Tosca Coaching and Consulting. You may be hearing my dog in the background. Shall we just name what's present here? There she is. Yeah, let's hope that goes away. But I'm excited for you to talk to Holly Corbett today. We're going to talk about getting lost and finding joy. So I'm thrilled for that. And Sienna, no. Let's hope that works. If not, I gotta move rooms. I was setting this up to have the tree behind me because I thought it was joyful. Yeah, what a great time of year to talk about getting lost and finding joy, as like so many of us are kind of, reflecting on the past year, and we're kind of discovering what it is we need as we wrap up the year, and maybe some of you are even thinking about intentions for the next year. One of the things that I do is I try to come up with a word that is my intention for the year. This year, my word was expansion. And so I'm in the process of figuring out what next year's will be. And so we're just waiting for Holly to come on here and share her life experiences. Here she is. Hey, Holly. I might be moving locations because Sienna's in the room. But I'm going to bring you on right now. Okay, let's see. Hopefully this works. There we go.
Hi.
Hi.
How's it going?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. My dog is acting up too.
That's funny. Well, I might have to move because she loves the squeaky toys. And she seems, I started the fire because she also likes to sit by the fire, so I was hoping that might soothe her, but.
You're so festive. I like your tree.
Oh my gosh, yeah. I was like, hey, we're talking about joy. Like, why not move to a location that has a little bit of, yeah, joy in it?
Nice.
But so yeah, I'm just like so thrilled that you're here. You have been just such an important like army of one in my pursuit of this like entrepreneurial journey, and you've opened up so many doors, created so many opportunities, and like I just don't even know how I could ever repay you for all that you've meant for me. But this small opportunity token to like show up here, I hopefully also brings you joy in the journey. So again, I just want to say thank you for your friendship and your encouragement and for being here today on this platform to share your genius and your life experience.
You're so sweet, and I just have to say thank you. I know, I think we met through the female quotient, right? And
Yeah.
we met for coffee, and right away I knew we were going to be friends. And I love when that happens. And I'm so glad that we've stayed connected and been friends. It's been 4 years now. So, and I love how you speak your truth. You're such an inspiration. I think so many people, look up to you, and it inspires other people to do the same. So I love
Oh
all
my
that.
gosh. Well, thank you so much. And one of the things that you did recently, somebody, I just to kind of really honor the kind of person you are, as just so generous and lifting other women up, especially, you reached out and said, "Hey, I was invited to have this conversation, and I could have done it solo or with others." And you were like, I always want to open the door for people. And so you invited me to that conversation. And it just, for those of you who don't know Holly, like that's the kind of person she is, that, you use your opportunities to help others. And so that's just like, if we just had more of that in the world.
Well, you were perfect. You were meant to be speaking on that panel. So I'm so glad you're
No.
with me.
Well, thank you. So, um, Holly, you're an author, you're a writer, you're a Forbes columnist, you are the head of content at Consciously Unbiased, which does, big work around, DEI and training around bias. You have a passion for like health and wellness. You have so many, you're a world traveler. You have so many interests um, and while I cannot do your introduction justice, I just want to say that you're just super talented in bringing stories to the forefront that maybe other people wouldn't put forward. And so I'm just want to honor like that. You also follow your truth, and you also, you do what's in your heart to do. And I think that's kind of what was leading to our conversation today around getting lost. And so I'd love for you to introduce yourself, share what you feel compelled to share about your upbringing, about your life experiences that kind of make you who you are today.
Yeah, sure. So I'm much more comfortable being the interviewer than the interviewee. I love interviewing people. So this is new, being on the other side. Yeah, I think, thank you for that about following my truth. I try. I don't always, uh, I sometimes I fall short, but I try to live that way. And I think just a little bit about me. So I grew up in upstate New York. Um, and then I went to college and I'd never really traveled before. And I came from a homogenous town, but I was always really curious and I was always really curious about other people and other cultures. That's probably why I went into journalism and storytelling because I really love to learn about other people and tell their stories. And so when I was in college, I think my roommate told me about a program called Semester at Sea and I wanted to study abroad. I didn't know if I could do it. And then when I found out about this program, it was essentially a ship where you went around the world and you got to go to 12 different countries and do case studies. And it was one of those moments where I just, sometimes you get those moments where like, yes, like this is something
Mm.
I have to do, I want to do. And luckily I got a scholarship to be able to go. And it was the first time I'd ever been on a plane. It was the first time I'd ever been out of the country. And that was really life changing for me. To be able to, go to all these different places and see how other people lived. And I just felt so energized and alive in that experience. And there were so many eye-opening moments there. And that really gave me a sense of wanderlust. And
Mm.
after that, I graduated and I backpacked Europe and I my mom wanted me to apply to grad schools. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't think I was ready to go into the quote unquote, real world yet, but I applied to one grad school and I got in. And so I cut that trip short. And I studied magazine journalism. One of my roommates from college invited me to come to New York after graduation. And I didn't have a job, but again, it was one of those moments where it felt right and something I had to do. So I ended up moving to the city, no job, living with about 3 other women in a railroad apartment. And those were some of the most fun days. Ended up going with a temp agency in Condé Nast, a magazine company. And I remember just going to their HR department every day, checking in any openings, any full-time openings. And eventually they probably got sick of me because they finally said, yes, there's an assistant happiness editor position open at Self Magazine. And I went for it. And that was my first job. I learned a lot about positive psychology and reporting. And it was an amazing experience. And it was there that I met 2 other women, colleagues who became friends. And we worked together for a couple years and we went on a trip together, again, on a whim. My friend Amanda, who was an editor with me at Self, her best friend Jen, were going to Argentina. She asked if I wanted to come. They didn't think I'd say yes. I didn't really know Jen at the time, but I asked my boss for the time off. She gave it to me and we went on this trip and we just kind of made a pact. We said, wouldn't it be, amazing if we could travel like this more long term? And of course, it was one of those nights where you're like, yes, of course, that would be amazing, but never thought it would really pan out. But we ended up saving for 2 years and planning for 2 years and made a pact to collectively quit our jobs on the same day. And I think because I had peer pressure, it really, as nervous as I was to do that, we ended up quitting on the same day, and we took a year-long trip together and went to 12, 13 different countries over the course of a year. We left in June 2006, I think, and came back in June 2007. And while we were on the road, we kept a travel blog. So this was before social media. I mean, Facebook had just come out. I don't think we were using it, but we did keep a blog about our trip. And what I thought was career suicide, like vagabonding around the world and kind of opting out when I was, what was I, 26 or 27 at the time, ended up being really actually a good thing, because we got an offer to write a book. Agents approached us and asked if we wanted to write a book about our experience. And so, of course, we said yes. And again, it was another one of those times where, certain times in life, I think you just feel like things are right. And even if they don't make logical sense, you go for them. And I think that was one of those instances. So we wrote a book, and then I stayed freelance for a long time working on the Lost Girls website, and we invited other travelers to share their stories. And it was really about getting out of automatic pilot, right, in life, when, really looking at what matters most and trying to live in line with that. And so did that for a long time. And then I started working, I kind of switched directions again. I don't have a linear path. And I work for the Female Quotient, which is a company that is in the business of gender equality. And I oversaw communications for them for a couple of years before going where I am now, Consciously Unbiased, which is a movement to build belonging in the workplace. Sorry, my camera keeps dropping because I keep getting alerts. I thought I turned on
Oh,
do
yeah,
not
yeah, the do not
disturb.
disturb. Yeah, you can throw the do not disturb. Maybe that'll help you. But no worries. No worries. This is that's what I love about live TV. You just never know what you're going to get. But yeah, I think, well, can you hear me? I can't
I'm
hear. Oh,
back.
there you go.
Yes.
Okay, you're back. Um, yeah. So, well, was there anything else? Because you kind of, the last thing you mentioned was like being at Consciously Unbiased. And I just wanted to check to see if there was anything you were going to share before
Yeah,
I.
I think I think I so my career went from like health and wellness and travel, which I loved, into more social impact. And I think for me, like, I've always wanted to feel like the work that I'm doing is meaningful.
Mhm.
And I think even though I didn't have a planned path for any of this, um, somehow I think I ended up where I was meant to be. And I mean, I'm still working on it. It's always an evolution. I don't ever think there's a destination. But I think for a lot of people, it's about having a plan. And for me, it was kind of just about following what felt right and staying open and looking for opportunities. So my path may
Mhm.
be a little different, but that's kind of how I roll.
Yeah, oh my gosh. Like there's so much in what you shared that I want to like, tap into and ask about. And I think the first thing is around, well, first of all, you moved to New York without like having a job. That's like hugely courageous and not something a lot of people would do. And then, you then took a leap to quit your job, to do this travel around the world for a year, which you reflected in a book that you co-authored, which was The Lost Girls. Um, Great read, by the way, for you guys watching, like really inspiring. And so, and then, you were freelance, right? Which again is, some people like view that as, oh my gosh, that's risky. And how do you know where your next paycheck is coming from? Um, so like, was this always in you, right? To just follow what you felt was right, even if you didn't know, like you said, you didn't know where it was going to land you. Um, Or yeah, like where do you think that comes from in terms of how you look at opportunities and make your choices?
Yeah, I think, I mean, there are two ways to look at it. Either, you know, some of the choices I think either unconventional or maybe irresponsible if you're looking at it from that lens. But for me, it was just going with what felt right. And I think I've always kind of had this sense that life is short, right? We only get so much time. And oh my gosh, now that I'm older, I really am understanding that because time just seems to be going so fast. But, you know, at the end of the day, we only have so much time here. And I think when I was younger, also you have more leeway. I think you know, there was, yes, these were risks, but if it didn't work out, you could always switch directions. I feel a little bit less of that now, you know, with mortgages and kids and everything. But yeah, I think, I mean, at the end of the day, if you don't follow something that your heart is telling you, like this is right, like you need to go for it, then there's going to be that sense of regret. And I didn't want to live with that sense of regret, right? So if I had the privilege to, um, you know, be able to find a way to make it work and move to New York and get a job at a temp agency to cover my bills until I found a full-time position, or if I was lucky enough to meet two friends and be able to save for a few years to be able to go on this trip, for so many other women around the world who that just wouldn't have been a possibility or a reality for, then, you know, I felt like it was just something that I had to do because it was speaking to me and it felt right.
Yeah, it's like it's so multifaceted is what I'm hearing, right? There's so many dimensions of that. And I think what a lot of people do is when they have a gut, because what I'm hearing is like you really followed your gut and like what felt right for you in the moment. And I think what a lot of people do is they have that gut intuition and then they go into like the pro con list making,
I've done
right?
that too.
And
I've
they
still
talk
done that.
themselves out of it, right?
Yeah.
So how have you stayed out of that going into the rationalization mode and like what your head is saying makes sense or doesn't make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I'm totally guilty of that. There's been so every time in my life that I have not listened to that gut instinct,
Mm,
it has not worked out for me. Every time I've
mm,
rationalized and been, hey, this makes the most sense, even though it didn't feel like it for me, it didn't work out. So I
mm,
think, you know, it is easy to get stuck in your head and to listen to all these outside voices of what you should be doing. But I think it's really about creating the space, giving yourself that space, right?
mm,
If you give yourself permission to take that space, and then it's in that quiet or that stillness that that inner voice comes through a lot stronger. And I mean,
mm,
that looks different for different people in different ways. Everybody has different ways of getting there. Um, but I've noticed in my own life those times when I've ignored my gut, it's because I didn't give myself space to kind of
mm,
go within and block out all the other voices. And for me, that, you know, it could just be taking time, walking in nature. You know, I've meditated on and off throughout my life. But a lot of it for me was like physical activity. Like I will go for a run and I get my best ideas that way, or
mm,
just outside for a walk. But for me personally, it's always been being outside and moving that I've been
mm,
able to kind of better tune in and listen to myself. And also journaling. I
mm,
don't do it as much as I used to, but all those times in my life where I took those big risks, I'm looking back and one pattern was I always wrote. Like even when I was
mm,
little, I had boxes and boxes of journals. And I think I process my emotions and my thoughts through writing. I'm much better when I'm writing than when I'm speaking. And so that was always a tool that I used. And I found that in those times in my life where I did take the space to write, to journal, to be outside, and moving are the times that I took risks that
mm,
better aligned with um, my values and what felt right to me.
mm. I love the tools and tips that you're sharing too of kind of coming back to yourself and giving yourself because what I'm hearing and what you're saying, giving yourself space is that like it's not like when I'm not hearing that you make decisions on a whim and it's like, oh, because some people do that, right? It's like, I'm just gonna do this, and like it's that can also be toxic, right? To just because then there's like this addiction to the rush of that. That's not what I'm hearing. I'm hearing like really giving yourself the space to honor what is true for you. And the question that's coming up for me, right? Because we're part of this conversation was about getting lost, and so I'm curious for you, like in the journey, when you acknowledge, okay, this is what I need to do. Like, at what points did you or have you felt lost in your life? Like, is it also just feeling lost even if you made the decision and you're still not sure what it means? Or like, tell me more about, yeah, that feeling of just like, I'm not really sure where I'm at right now.
Yeah, yeah. No, I've definitely felt like I'm not sure what direction I'm going in now. I mean, for me, when I
Mm,
talk about the Lost Girls and getting lost, it has a positive
mm,
connotation because it's really about getting lost in the world, right? And being fully present and taking in what's around you. And I love that idea because I think so often we think we have to know where we're going, but that's just a form of control, right? Like we're trying to control, like, this is where I need to be. And oftentimes where we end up isn't where we thought we were going to be anyways. So it's really about, for me, getting lost and being present. But also, yeah, there's been times like, I mean, in my own life, career, like, what am I doing next? And I think right before I joined the female quotient, really wanting to be telling stories that I felt were amplifying different voices and that were making an impact in some of the changes that I was becoming more conscious of in terms of systemic issues that I wasn't so aware of before. Um,
mm,
so that was a time. And, I've been divorced before, so that was a time where I didn't listen to my gut and I rationalized and I went forward anyways. And those were the times in life where I think I was moving too quickly,
mm,
and not pausing enough. And so, and it happens, life is in phases. It's not, we live in the reality of, you know, our worlds, and, life is fast paced. We've got social media, we've got so much happening in the news and in the world. And I think especially now with the pandemic, we're used to uncertainty. We're used to things changing. Um, and for me, it's been important, even though we've maybe we're doing less, to not get so caught up in like social and news and all these outside messages that we get. Like I've had to make a very conscious effort to kind of pull back a little bit from that. So
Well, and actually, that feels like a little bit of a theme, right? Like pulling back from the external, right? Whether it's, you're traveling for a year, whether it's like choosing a job or like whatever the expectations are that society puts on us. Um, and so I'm curious, how do you shut out the external so that you are honoring what's true for you, because those pressures can be really really strong.
yeah, I think it's really just being intentional, right?
Mm,
Being more intentional. Again, it goes back to not just going on automatic pilot, right? And
mm,
maybe, the first step is intentionally giving yourself permission that you can disconnect, that you can unplug. Um, I was telling my husband the other day, I'm like, I feel like there's going to be a leave your phone at home movement where we all just leave our phones so that we aren't distracted by all these alerts anymore and can be fully like present and unavailable. But again, I grew up, I had an analog childhood. So I remember the days where when you were out, nobody could reach you. So I think it's permission, and then just creating that space to be curious and to figure out what energizes you, right? Not listening to everything else, whatever the trends are or what's hot now or what people are doing or what the news is saying. Giving yourself that space to figure out what energizes you and then to follow that, like have the courage to follow that and commit to that. And actually, I just interviewed Eve Rodsky. So she's the author of Fair Play, and she has a new book coming out, which I think everybody should get. It's so amazing. It resonated with me. The message is so important. It's called Find Your Unicorn Space: How to Make Time for Creativity in a Too Busy World. And it comes out at the end of this month. But what she was saying is that this space for creativity it's not like it's not optional. Like it's actually tied like to your mental health, to your well-being, to your productivity. And I think we often think it's indulgent. And by creativity, she doesn't mean just painting or writing. It's whatever it is that energizes you and that you share with the world. So like her example is, if you love, doing yoga, stop perfecting your headstand and be a yoga instructor. Like share that, or if you love cooking, make time to be creative and do new recipes and then share that with people, bring people together. And her message was also, especially for women, often we're so, we tie our value to our roles, like professional, parent, partner, but those things are external, right? They're not internal. It's not who we are, the roles that we play. And I think just remembering that, like going back to that and knowing that we aren't our roles and finding what energizes us, hi buddy, is
Sorry.
no worries. My dog is doing the same thing. Yeah, I think that's the key. And we forget to do that, or we think we have to wait until we retire or work slows down to do any of that. But I think it's so important, because when you do that, you're happier, then you show up differently for the people around you. Like if everybody was finding time for creativity of what energizes us, think about like the ripple effect that would have in our communities. We'd all be a little happier. And I'll give you an example. So I was, since I had kids, I have two kids, an 8-year-old son, a 6-year-old daughter. And since I had kids, I stopped training. Like I loved running. I would do marathons, I would do triathlons, and I just stopped training. It took a lot of time, and I just didn't think I could make the time for it. And recently my sister encouraged me to train for a race, and I loved it. I was outside, in the autumn air and the sunshine, listening to my music, moving my body. And my son said to me, he was like, Mom, you're being so nice lately. Like you're being nicer than usual. And I'm like, what does that mean? He's like, why are you yelling at us this much? And I stopped and I thought, and I was like, huh. And I didn't realize it, but he was right. I was like, you know what, honey? It's because Mommy is making time to do something for herself that she loves and she enjoys. I'm training for a race again. And that, it was just such a moment to me that, taking time for that, maybe you feel like it's selfish. Like maybe I felt like, oh, I should be cleaning the house or, checking off my to-dos. But it's actually better for you and everybody else around. And we forget that.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I love that. I love when our changes are mirrored in those who are around us. I love that. And okay, I'm gonna totally get my dog out of here. Okay, Santa, look, it's time. Take it. Yeah, Mama needs alone time. You want to see? Wait, hold on. Wait, hold on. I gave a little look earlier, but there she is. I'm gonna have to close the door. So hold on. Let me just door is persnickety. But as I'm doing this is live, right? Like this is, these, it's kind of like really. I don't know if it's gonna work. Anyway, we gotta keep her out. So I'm glad I wore actual pants today.
I know, I was gonna say, I got out of my sweatpants for you, but then I'm like, wait, it doesn't really matter. No one.
It doesn't matter unless you have to close the door. But you know what I was going to say in all of that is, you know, you're a writer in your work, right?
Yeah.
So then what does that mean for you in terms of creativity? Like, are you just like satisfied because like you're writing for what you do, or is that not filling you up enough and you need to find other ways to create?
Well, I think there's a difference between writing for your work and writing for yourself. Um,
Mm,
and also I think there's a fine line because we are so conditioned to tie our value to what we
mm,
produce. And that's really hard. It's been very hard for me to say, you know,
mm,
I can just journal and it doesn't matter. There's nothing, we aren't, it's been a mindset shift because we aren't what we produce. And
mm,
in our culture, our value has been so tied to that, right? Um, and I think that, it's really more about connecting with yourself, connecting with people you love, connecting with nature, just living your life. Like, yes, we have to work, and yes, it's important, and yes, we want to be productive. But if that's all you're doing, you're off balance, and it's always about recalibrating. And I've always had trouble with
mm,
that because I'll go in a totally different direction, and then I have to, come back and turn inward and give myself
mm,
permission to say, you know what, I'm not doing this for anybody to see or view, but like I need to do this,
mm,
and I'll be able to show up better if I am doing this for myself. And so when it comes to writing, like lately I've had characters coming into my head. I've never written fiction, but as I've started to create
oh
space,
wow.
I
Mhm,
have like storylines and plots, and I have to admit, I haven't really explored it because I've got these other deadlines and I've got things I have to get out. But
mm,
um, I think I think we have to give ourselves that because when you create that space, I do believe things start to come to you
mm,
in one form or another, whatever our creativity looks like for you. And it's part of our journey to listen to that
mm.
and then follow that. And again, it's the real world. We have we have schedules and appointments and to-dos. But I just think that it's so important to make ourselves a priority too, and not forget about ourselves in the process. Because guess what? Work's always going to be there. It's not like it never ends. Like, oh, I'm done. It's always there. So you can't
Right,
wait and put it off.
right. Yeah, I mean, I just love what you're bringing up here, right? Is this like the workism, right? The work centricity that we have in this culture. And like, you know, I think a lot of people feel guilty, right? If they're holding boundaries to say, like, hey, you don't get more of my time. Like, I have other things that are important in my well-being, you know? And so, and then it's a battle, right? It's not, it's, you know, what I'm hearing you say is like the recalibration sounds like sometimes it just gets out of whack and you got to like come back to that. Um, and so for you, I'm wondering, right? Like, because we've been talking about the getting lost and in an arena of like it being a good thing to just be present in the world and just experiencing it and not almost like what I'm hearing was like not really having a destination but just getting just like losing sense of time maybe even as a way to
Yeah.
explain it.
Yeah.
And so how does that connect for you to finding joy? Like and yeah.
Yeah, I think because, what is joy? Joy is it's being present, right? It's not
Mm,
worrying
mm,
about what's going to happen. It's not,
mm,
thinking about the past. Um, and
mm,
yeah, I think that that idea for me of I find it through, wandering and having no agenda. And that really puts me
mm,
in the present moment. There was something else I was going to say. Oh, I think also like it's not the big milestones, right? Like so
mm.
often in life, we think, I'm going to get that promotion, I'm going to get that raise, I'm going to get married, I'm going to do this. And it's so funny, like most of the time, the memories that I have about what brings me joy are like a small moment, you know? It's like
Mm-hmm.
my husband throwing my kids in the pool and playing with them, or like, you know, something, you know, my sister laughing when I'm at her house. It's not anything significant, but if you never allow yourself to be present and pause and just be aware. You know, I think it's just about being open to that. And that is what joy is. It's just here, it's just being present. It's like seeing what we have to be grateful for.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of road bumps that happen, right? Like we all have stories, we all have obstacles, we all have challenges, some of us much more than others. Um, but it's being, there's a quote, my favorite quote is, you know, life isn't about waiting for the storm to pass. It's about learning to dance in the rain. And I love that because
Mm,
it's always going to happen. How do you just find the joy in the middle of a storm? And that's
yeah.
what all of us have been having to do in COVID.
Mhm. And you know, with this platform, right? With my guests, I'm always like, well, what's in your heart to share, and like, what do you want the world to know? And so, why is this idea of joy and the idea of giving ourselves permission to get lost, and like, why is this a message that you wish more people knew?
Because I think that, you know, I just would want more people to know that your value isn't tied to what you produce. It's not tied to what you do, and that you are important and just as you are, and you're worth it. You know, you're worth in giving yourself permission to just be unavailable, to explore what energizes you and to follow that. And I think that if everybody did that, then, you know, it would just, again, it would have a ripple effect, right? Like there would
Yeah.
be more people around who are feeling this joy. And
Mhm.
when you have that, it's contagious, right? It spreads to other people. And again, it's not perfect. You can't live in the state all the time, but it is a practice. If
Mhm.
you carve out time for that, even a
Yeah.
little bit of time, right? And you put yourself on your priority list, then I do think that will impact how you feel, in turn impact the people around you. And if more of us did that, I think there'd just be more joy to go around, especially in these times.
Oh my gosh, I couldn't agree more with that. And I think that as a leadership coach and a career coach, so much of the time the counsel I give is like, what is going to make you like what is going to make your heart happy in this moment, right? Like, so if there's resistance about like doing the resume, or there's resistance, or you just can't find joy in anything, it's like, okay, then to step out of like the work arena, and like, what is it that will make you smile? Because to me, that journey of doing things that light you up, that are not attached to producing, that are not attached to validating that it's okay to be you, and this, all that stuff. Like, I think that's what helps people come back to themselves. And I think it helps people to rediscover what really matters most. And that's the thing I think that unlocks career pathways and joy in the doing of the job, because then you realize like, oh, I'm doing something that's life sucking and that's not life giving, because now I know what joy feels like, and now I'm like, want to feel that more often.
Yes,
you know?
exactly. Yeah, and I mean that is, I mean, I would argue, and not to get too esoteric, but that's our purpose, right? To come back to ourselves, to figure out who we are, and to show up as we fully are. And that all goes back to pausing and getting lost and tuning out all these other voices so you can be who you are. And once I think that starts happening, then you start to make choices that better align with who you are and your values. And we all get off track, right? Everybody does. And just to have compassion for yourself and not judge yourself, and to forgive yourself, and then, go get back on track. And also I think to, you know, a lot of it I think comes down to judgment, right? Like
Mm,
non-judgment for yourself and non-judgment for others. Like why are we judging each other so much? Like let people live in a way that is aligned with who they are, you know. And I think there's so much fear, and that forms judgments, and then it keeps us from really seeing each
mm,
other. But Tosca, I wanted to go back to something you said like with your clients you help them, you know, you ask them like what really like makes their heart sing. So how do you
mm,
do that? Like what if someone has no idea? Like some of us have passions, you know, like
mm,
love doing things, but
mm.
for people who maybe aren't quite sure, like how do you help them uncover that?
Well, it's always like case dependent, right? Like with where a person is at and like what we're finding in terms of like energy blocks, and the stuckness. So the thing that, kind of comes to mind as you're asking me that is going to the body for answers,
Mm,
right? Like you were saying, like exercise is something that brings you joy, right? Um, and oftentimes if I, if somebody can't really articulate or identify, then I'll go right to like, well, where do you feel that in your body? You know?
yes, yeah. Because our bodies hold emotions. That's right. And that you just connected something for me.
Mm,
You get out of your head and into your body. And that must be why, for me, moving, it's
mm.
always incorporated movement because it's that connecting and tuning in where you can really listen to your gut. That makes sense.
Yeah, it's a practice that I've had too, and do it in different ways, and then at different times I need different things. It's like choose your own adventure. Sometimes I need a yoga practice. Sometimes I need something more rigorous than that. But when I think about even in my younger years, like getting on a treadmill helped me get off the treadmill of my mind, you
Hmm.
know? And so the concept is simple, but like when I say like get into your body, it's not a woo-woo concept. It's like this, we are doing it all the time in order to get out of our spin. And I think what people don't do because of Western society and everything, right, is realize, oh, I can go to my body for answers,
Hmm.
and I can find truth in that. Um, and just honoring and knowing. And I think the other part of it is honoring and knowing that you don't need to know beyond this moment, which I feel like is a theme of what you've been talking about, which is like, I'm honoring in this moment, I need to move to New York. I'm honoring in this moment, I just know that I need to quit this job so I can do this trip around the world. And who knows what will happen with my career, Because we want a path, we want to know, like you said, the destination. And it sounds like, and maybe it's also a struggle for you, but it sounds like you've found some peace in not having to see the whole picture. Is that true, or am I making that up?
Yeah, no, definitely. Because we can't see the whole picture, right? Like we
Mm,
cannot possibly know what is going to happen. So, given that, if you try to control your circumstances by saying, "Oh, I need to stay here because then I'll know," well, you
mm,
don't know. Like you could stay at your job for security, but you
mm,
know, you could get laid off instead of
right.
taking a chance on something else that your heart was telling you because you wanted to control the outcome. But
Mm,
none of us know what the outcome is. The only thing we can control is our own actions, and we can align our actions to our values and what our instincts are telling us is right for us if we tune into
mm.
ourselves and make the next best decision, right? Um, I think that's all there is. And
Yeah.
again, it goes by fast, so you want to make the time count. And I think
Right.
like even for me, like now I'm a mom, like, you know, I'm not traveling anymore. I'm not doing any, you know, training for anything big. I'm not, but again, that's tied to accomplishments. Well, that's not where our value lies. We don't
Mm,
always have to be striving to accomplish anything.
mm,
I'm not saying don't have a goal
right.
or don't give your all to something,
Right.
but just give yourself a break that you don't always have to be doing. And
Yeah.
for me right now, it's really about creating that space and enjoying my family and figuring out, yeah, like where next? And I
Mm.
don't have to know, but I do have to create that space to get some insight on that.
Yes. And I think it's such a perfect time for this message because a lot of people will have some time off, in the next couple weeks. And, I think that addiction to doing, right, and productivity, whether the productivity means I'm going to clean my house top to bottom because, like, I
Yeah,
need to feel like I'm using this time, like, to really reconsider what it means,
yeah.
right, to just honor your space. Um, and there was something else, if I can tap back into what you were saying around, like, I think you talked about like staying curious,
Yeah.
and and not having to know, which a lot of people are just super uncomfortable with. Um, and also, this is what makes me think of is at the end of the day, there are very, very few decisions that are permanent. And I think people forget that. Marriage is not a permanent decision, really, right? And, I am not, even having kids, right? If you
Mhm.
realize like you can't do it or it's not for you, right? There's solutions. Like I'm going a little extreme here, you know?
Yeah. Okay. This is such a point for me, Tosca, because when we were doing the Lost Girls book and traveling and
Mm,
all, and I just that was our message. Like,
mm,
if you if you make a decision and it's not right for you, you can always switch directions, right? So just do it. I would have to say, being someone who has had that mentality and then made decisions that essentially altered
mm,
my life, um, for a very long time in ways that didn't appreciate, but that I learned from, right?
mm,
Um, I often think about what you just said. I think the point is that you can always switch directions.
mm,
There are decisions that have long-term impacts on your life and on your mental health and on your happiness, your career choices. But those decisions that I've made that have had that impact on me was only when I wasn't listening to my gut.
mhm,
Only
mhm,
when I went against what I knew was right.
mm,
I have never made a big risky decision where my heart was like, you need to do this,
right.
and looked back and been like, oh, that wasn't right. Ever. It's only
Yeah.
happened when I wasn't. So I would say the most important point is to give yourself the space to find, to tune into yourself and your truth and always act on that.
Mm,
Even if it's hard, even if it's scary, even if other people do not agree and you may be penalized for it. But at the end of the day, you can't go wrong because you were listening to what was right for you and true for you. And it may mean some people don't stay with you, and that's okay, right? Because then you're just finding the people, opening yourself up to the people who will. But
mm.
yeah, I would say absolutely. If you are following your truth and your instinct and your gut, just go for it. Even if it doesn't work out the way you planned, you can always switch directions. I'd say the only time that it could backfire is if you're not following your gut. But then if you aren't, maybe there were some lessons you needed to learn. Like in my,
Mm.
like there were some lessons that I needed to learn. And just a reminder to make space and listen to my truth. It just confirmed that when you listen to yourself and what's really important, that you will be okay. You'll be on the right path. And when you don't, you could experience some setbacks, and that's okay too.
Yeah, it's like this, like you were using the word non-judgment earlier, right? Which is like, we can look at our past and be judgmental about how that decision, really effed things up for us or whatever, or we can look back and say like that decision led me to who I am today, right? It served me. This whole idea of like life is happening for you and not to you. Like is one of those real heady things, right? Which is like, especially when the shit is crappy, you know, how can you, if it's not in that moment because you just can't be there in that moment, but later say, how did that serve me? And I think a lot of that is tied to how we're telling the stories of our lives. Like,
Mm-hmm.
what are our narratives? Because we get these old narratives, and at some point we have to stop and say, like actually getting lost was the best thing that happened to me, you know, and it led me to this. And I'm not saying put this like bullshit toxic positivity spin on things, but it's more like to see things from a different angle, you know, in order to be open and expansive.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, definitely agree. And it's also giving yourself the grace and to unpack, right, when things are hard.
Right.
Um, and like you said, the non-judgment and the forgiveness and, you know, take with you what you will. And some of it just sucks.
Mm-hmm.
Some of it just, I mean, it's some of it is hard, right? And a
Yeah.
lot of it is hard. But there's something to be taken from, I think, even some of the most difficult
Yeah.
situations, right? Because you're not the same person when you at the other end of it as you were when you went into it.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, and I think, you know, what's coming up for me too, right, is like we're two women, white, very privileged, right? We're talking about joy and we're talking about these opportunities. And I know you do a lot of research on, you know, the impact of today's world and society on people of color and all of that stuff, right? There's all, like, that comes with a whole heap of stuff. And and at the same time, I feel like there's opportunity always in looking at yourself and saying, like, what am I doing that's serving me and what am I doing that's not serving me? But I'm curious, you know, what if you have any builds just in that arena, right? Of accessing joy for all. You know,
Yeah.
like you know what I mean? I know this is like that's like a big question, but like but I feel like there may be people out there that are like, well, that's not available to me, right? Because I got all these things stacked, you
Yeah.
know.
Yes. Yeah. You know, I'm going to go back to the interview with Eve Rotsky, and
Hmm.
she was finding that
Hmm.
when it came to time and time spent on creative pursuits or things that brought joy, what surprised me in the research was that people that should have had the most privilege of time didn't feel that they did, right? Because they were still trying. So the top income earners, according to the research, felt like they had to uphold their status, and so they were working, 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 and some of the more marginalized people in the study reported more spending more time on what brought them joy, and it came in the form of like participation in church groups or volunteering or different things like that, because that was prioritized. And I think, yeah, there are real systemic issues of inequality, and I also was reading about how marginalized people may have less time, right? Because there are other things that they are doing that take
Just to
longer
survive, just to
just to
survive. Yeah,
survive.
right.
Yeah. Um, but I think that even in the moment, it is loving yourself, giving yourself that permission, and to say, like, right now, I'm going to take some
Mm.
time to do what brings me joy, to do what energizes me, to do what fuels me. And again, we're all so different and we all have different circumstances, and that looks different for everybody. I mean, maybe it's dancing in your living room, maybe it's writing in your journal, maybe it's going out for a walk, right?
Right.
Maybe it's visiting your grandmother or your mother, it just whatever that looks like for you, but really just making time for that. And it may only be a few minutes, maybe that's all you have, but make those few minutes for yourself, because
Mm.
that's what matters, right? If you don't do that at all in your day or your weeks, then you're not going to feel energized, and you're not really going to feel joy, because life is this collection of small moments. It's not the big milestones. It's the connecting with people. It's the connecting with ourselves. And that's all we have are the moments, right? Because like we said, we don't know what's going to happen. Anything could happen. You don't have
I
tomorrow, but you have now.
Yeah, I'm totally starting a hashtag Holly is my guru. Yeah, and I think that what comes up for me in just you sharing that, right? Because like again, coming into holidays, people spending time with family, people being in maybe toxic situations, a lot of trauma, a lot of re-traumatization happens at this time of year. And also, can we give ourselves permission to step out of that house or that situation for 5 minutes and come back to ourselves and give ourselves what we need, to maybe we need to unpack something, maybe we need to like, just breathe. But yeah, like time is available to us all, right? It's like that real sticky time thing, but how can we it's like give ourselves permission slips, and I forgot who uses that permission slip. Oh gosh, I forgot who
Is it
does
Mel,
that.
Mel Robbins? I don't know.
Oh, maybe it is Mel Robbins. Yeah, I think there's a couple people that use it. But like, it's kind of like sometimes I think a technique of just giving yourself a permission slip to say, I'm giving myself a permission to do something that makes me happy today, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
Because of all the burdens and the pressures that we put on ourselves to like, do the mandatories. But joy isn't mandatory, is it not?
Yeah. Yes. And I think, this is just a small example, but at a point where I was working a lot, and like then you do the bed or the dinner bath bed routine with the kids, and then you're cleaning up at night. Even something small, like I started to listen to podcasts or books on tape, and it
Mm,
wouldn't have anything to do with work or anything I had to be reading or listening to.
mm,
And it would, or even just music. And even that little thing, like
yeah,
finding a way to make your present, and you've got to get stuff done, but finding a way to make that more joyful, like that had a
mm,
huge impact on me. I felt like I was learning, because learning is a big thing that fuels me. I felt like I was
yeah,
still learning when I didn't have time to read books. It was just
yeah.
another way around it. So I think there's little ways we can kind of tweak our everyday to fit those things in that fuel us.
Well, and I love that your awareness of what fuels you, right? Like your values, like what's important to you. And I think, you know, so often people don't realize like that exercise of identifying your values and like what's most important often will help you identify what's missing in your life or what you're needing or like what your mandatories are, whether it's in, the next choice you make in relationship or in the place that you live or in job. But if you can really understand, man, I just really need X,
Mhm.
um, I think a lot of clarity comes
Yeah.
when you can identify those things that you need and you are hungry for.
Yeah, and that comes from getting lost and giving yourself space, right?
Yeah.
If you're moving too quick, you can't really identify that. But you have to keep checking in with yourself, and it changes, right?
Yeah.
Like hopefully we're all growing,
Yes.
changing. So what used to fuel you may not fuel you anymore, and that's fine, but
And
just
I
being
think
in
that's
tune
where
with
the
that.
yeah, and I think that's where sometimes the discomfort comes and we don't understand what's happening because it's like, oh, what served you before actually isn't serving you anymore, and that's okay. And so what needs to change? That's like,
Yeah.
ooh, I love that. That's super powerful insight. Oh my gosh. So I'm cognizant that I can't believe we're already like at the top of the hour here. Um, and I so appreciate you sharing so much about your journey and what this means to you and why you care so deeply about it. Like, really just being in service of helping other people find their joy. Just, I love that. And, I'm curious, a couple things. Number one, is there anything you feel like we left on the table that you want to share, around this message we didn't hit on. And number two is like, if people want to get in touch with you, or like, what's your ask? Maybe like, what's your ask for the people watching?
Uh,
Um, yeah.
yeah, I mean, I think it just goes back to like, um, you know, let's not judge ourselves. Let's not judge each other. We're all doing the best we can, and let's find ways to do what energizes us and not keep putting it off, right? Because that's good for you and that's good for everybody around you. And yeah, that's just my hope for everybody. I know that there are a lot of hard circumstances and there's a lot of challenges, and my wish is that everybody can find a way to prioritize themselves and just love themselves and give them that space to do what makes them happy, even for a few minutes. Yeah, and if you want to get in touch, my website is hollycorbett.com, or just Instagram. You can send me a message. I'm really bad about my messages, so I apologize if I don't get back too quickly, but I tend to check them like once a week.
Awesome. Yeah. You know, it's like what I heard in that message is like, take care of you, and you're actually doing the world a favor. It's not just you. It's like the world will be a better place if you just take care of you, you know?
Right. Right. It's not selfish. It's actually the most selfless thing you can do.
Yeah.
So,
Mm.
but Tosca, I love your, thanks for all the hope and, inspiration that you spread. And I love your platform. I love your storytelling. I'm so glad we're friends, and I can't wait to see you in New York. I
Yes.
haven't been back except for once since the pandemic. So I'm very excited.
Oh, yeah. So I'm excited to see you, and thank you so much for the time you spent here. And yeah, what a time of year to spread joy. So let's keep spreading the message and look forward to continuing to support your art and your creativity because you're just so amazing at what you do. Um,
Thank you. I hope you have an amazing 2022. So many.
Thanks. Yes. Cheers to that. And thanks for
Cheers.
everyone listening now and in the future. And I guess ciao for now.
Bye.
Bye.